The crowd at Naval Special Warfare Training Facility fell into stunned silence. In that frozen moment, Jason, the Apex Miller's foot connected with the SEAL instructor's face, sending his cap flying through the morning air. What happened next would shatter everything the world champion thought he knew about real combat. I'll show you why military training is obsolete. He had boasted moments earlier. He couldn't have been more wrong. Drop a comment below. What would you do in the instructor's position? Jason, the Apex Miller wasn't just another MMA fighter. At 32, he had built an empire of success that most fighters only dreamed of. Three-time UFC champion, owner of 5 elite Apex combat gyms across California, and a social media phenomenon with millions of followers hanging on his every post. His Instagram bio said it all: undefeated, untouchable, unstoppable. Each word backed by countless victories and a string of knocked-out opponents who had dared to challenge his supremacy in the octagon. The designer watches, the custom sports cars, the celebrity students. They were all testaments to his meteoric rise from a local gym instructor to a global martial arts sensation. His signature lightning-fast kicks have become YouTube highlights, studied and imitated by aspiring fighters worldwide. Today, Miller stood at the visitor area of the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado with his elite team, 4 top-ranked fighters who served as both his training partners and devoted followers. Each wore matching black tracksuits emblazoned with the Apex Combat System logo, a brand that had become synonymous with modern fighting excellence. Remember Vegas last month? Derek the Tank Wilson, his head trainer, grinned. That heavyweight champion lasted, 30 seconds? 28. Mike Cobra Connor, Miller's sparring partner, chuckled. I timed it. Dawn light painted the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in shades of gold as visitors gathered for the special demonstration day, a rare opportunity for civilians to witness aspects of the legendary training program. The morning air carried a crisp ocean breeze, mixing with the excited whispers of spectators from around the country. David Reynolds stood motionless at his demonstration post. His navy blue instructor uniform and regulation capped a stark contrast against the facility's weathered concrete. At 32, he cut an impressive figure, ramrod straight, eyes fixed forward, every inch the picture of military precision. What the visitors photographing him didn't know was that beneath that standard instructor uniform stood a decorated SEAL with 3 combat deployments and classified operations that would never appear in any public record. Among the gathering crowd, Captain James Anderson paused in his morning walk. After 28 years in the Navy, he could read military bearing like others read newspapers. His weathered face registered subtle concern as he observed Miller's group, recognizing the telltale signs of impending trouble. The captain's hand tightened imperceptibly on his walking stick. He'd seen Reynolds' personnel file, the combat medals, the commendations, the operations that remained heavily redacted even at his clearance level. Look at that stance. Miller's voice carried across the training yard, professional assessment mixing with derision, completely vulnerable, no center of gravity. All that rigid military garbage would get him killed in a real fight. Captain Anderson's expression hardened. He'd watched Reynolds dismantle insurgent cells in environments that would make an MMA octagon feel like a playground. Professional fighters versus military instructors, Miller announced, his voice carrying the practice authority of a seminar leader. Let me show you the difference. His entourage formed a loose semicircle, their matching black Apex tracksuits creating a makeshift arena in front of the demonstration area. A family quietly ushered their children away. An elderly man with a veteran's pin on his jacket shook his head in disapproval, but others gathered closer, phones raised, sensing the promise of viral content. See, in real combat, Miller demonstrated a series of rapid strikes that stopped inches in the air around Reynolds. Every movement has purpose and lethal potential. His footwork was undeniably impressive, each step calculated and precise. This instructor here, he's been trained to suppress those instincts, to stand still, to be a walking recruitment poster. Captain Anderson had begun making his way through the crowd, but Miller's team smoothly intercepted, creating a human barrier. Let the demonstration finish, old-timer. The tank smiled, his muscle frame blocking the captain's path. Educational purposes only. That instructor is not what you think, Anderson warned quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Your friend is making a serious mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, Miller projected his voice like a ringside announcer. I'm about to show you why static defense, the kind these military types represent, is fundamentally obsolete in modern combat. Reynolds remained motionless, but Captain Anderson noticed a subtle shift in his breathing pattern. A change only a veteran would recognize. The calm before the storm. Final demonstration time, Miller announced, rolling his shoulders. His movements had taken on the fluid precision of a fighter entering competition mode. I'll show you what happens when military training meets reality. The morning sun caught the edge of Reynolds' cap insignia as Miller began his approach. The fighter's footwork was masterful, a complex pattern of steps developed through thousands of hours of tournament competition. Watch closely. Miller called out to his growing audience. This is why traditional military training fails against modern combat techniques. His body coiled like a spring, each muscle perfectly tense for explosive action. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Miller launched into a championship-caliber combination, a feint, a step-through, and finally a devastating spinning heel kick aimed directly at Reynolds' face. The impact was audible, a sharp crack that cut through the morning air. The instructor's cap flew in a perfect arc against the blue California sky. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The crowd stood frozen, phone still recording as the cap completed its journey and landed with a soft thud. Miller landed in a perfect fighting stance, a triumphant smile beginning to form on his lips. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why. His words died in his throat. Reynolds hadn't fallen, hadn't staggered, hadn't even stepped back. A thin line of blood traced its way down from his temple, but his eyes, now locked directly onto Miller's for the first time, showed neither pain nor fear, only cold, focused clarity that experienced combatants would recognize instantly. "Oh shit," the tank whispered, his earlier bravado evaporating. Then Reynolds moved. It wasn't the clumsy response of a training instructor. It was a precise, economical motion of a predator who had stalked targets through mountain passes and urban warfare zones. His demonstration prop clattered to the ground as he closed the distance between himself and Miller with a speed that defied expectation. Miller, to his credit, recognized the danger instantly. His tournament-trained reflexes snapped into action as he threw up a textbook defense. But Reynolds' first strike broke through it like it wasn't there. A perfectly executed combat technique that had nothing to do with scoring points and everything to do with neutralizing threats. The MMA champion staggered back, his eyes wide with sudden, humbling realization that he was drastically outmatched. Every counter he attempted was met with brutal efficiency, each of his tournament-winning techniques nullified by responses honed in environments where second place meant something very different than a silver medal. In less than 5 seconds, Miller found himself on the ground, his arm locked in a hold that teetered on the edge of structural failure. Reynolds' knee was precisely positioned on his sternum. Enough pressure to immobilize but not injure. "Stay down," Reynolds spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of command rather than the anger of someone who'd been assaulted. "This ends now." Later that afternoon, in a secure office within the training facility, Miller sat across from Reynolds. The cut on the instructor's temple had been cleaned and bandaged, though his composed demeanor remained unchanged. "I'd like to apologize," Miller began, his championship confidence replaced by genuine humility. Not just for the kick, but for everything before that. The disrespect, the showboating. "I completely misjudged what I was looking at." Reynolds studied him for a moment, his assessment as precise as his earlier combat response. "Most civilians do," he replied evenly. "That's partly by design." "The stillness," Miller said, leaning forward. "I thought it was just training protocol, just tradition, but it's actually about control, isn't it?" Reynolds nodded slightly. "The same discipline that lets us maintain position under pressure allows us to make split-second decisions under fire. Different application, same principle." "In competition," Miller reflected, "everything I do is designed to be seen, to score points, to impress judges." He gestured at Reynolds. But what you did, there was nothing showy about it, just pure efficiency. Combat isn't about winning medals, Reynolds stated simply. It's about completing objectives and staying alive. Style points don't count for much when lives are at stake. Miller rubbed his shoulder, where Reynolds' joint lock had left a reminder of the morning's lesson. The way you moved. I've trained with Special Forces guys from 3 different countries. Never seen anything quite like that. DevGru training adapts to operational requirements, Reynolds replied, neither confirming nor denying specifics. What works in an octagon isn't always what works in the field. The next morning, Reynolds stood at his post again, his uniform impeccable, his cap restored. No trace remained of the previous day's confrontation, but visitors who approached now did so with newfound respect. Their phones more discreet, their admiration more genuine. Among them was a young MMA student who'd watched yesterday's viral videos. "Sir," he addressed Captain Anderson, who happened to be passing by, "is it true what they say about the instructor? That he was in DevGru?" Anderson smiled slightly. "What you're looking at, young man, is the result of a fundamental misunderstanding many people have about military excellence. These instructors aren't fighters who occasionally stand still. They're warriors who've mastered the art of patience." He gestured to Reynolds' perfect posture. "The discipline you see here, the ability to maintain composure under pressure, that's not separate from their combat training. It's an extension of it. The same mental control that allows a SEAL to remain still under public scrutiny is what keeps him effective under enemy fire." The young student looked at Reynolds with new eyes, seeing beyond the uniform to the warrior beneath. "What would you have done in Miller's situation? Would you have seen past the military bearing to recognize the combat veteran beneath? Or would you, like many, have mistaken stillness for weakness?" Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if you learned something new about military training, and subscribe for more stories that might just change how you see the world.